Alright, twice in one day. This is a new record for me. A few weeks ago, I did this and kind of ran through my podcast checklist on my blog. And silly me, I forgot that Twitch actually deletes all of your streams after 2 weeks if you're a newbie streamer like me. Once you've been doing it for a while, I guess they keep it for like 60 days. And I would like this to make it to my YouTube channel so that folks can check it out later. So we're just going to do it again. Let's see. I'm going to restart Audacity. Make sure it's got alright speakers and everything. That's it. Microphone. Just on. I think so. Alright, let's see. Go find Twitch. Hey, we're live. Alright. Looks good. Alright, so I have a transcript ready, which I'll show you in a second. Basically this week I'm talking about guard clauses and exceptions. I got an email from a listener who had a question, and so I'm just going to turn that into my next podcast. For Weekly Dev Tips, if you haven't heard it, it's a real short podcast. You can find it on iTunes or anywhere else that you go finding podcasts. Of course, it's on WeeklyDevTips.com, and Stitcher has it here. So this is my one from 5 days ago. This one I'm going to record right now will be live on Monday. Next, we want to open Audacity. Did that, and we want to record the show. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I try and keep these to about 5 or 10 minutes. I'm using VS Code to do my recording, or my scripting rather, and put this in Markdown. You'll see when we get to that part of the process that I take the Markdown script and put it into Simplecast's webpage so that that's where the show notes come from. Let's see, back to the checklist. Let's verify. Record, leave 3 seconds of dead air at the start. I think that's all I need. Alright, so good to go. Hi, and welcome back to Weekly Dev Tips. I'm your host, Steve Smith, aka R. Dallas. This is episode 36, in which we'll discuss a question I recently received about guard clauses and exceptions. If you're enjoying these tips, please leave a comment or rating in your podcast app, tell a friend about the podcast, or follow us on Twitter and retweet our episode announcements so we can increase our audience. I really appreciate it. This week's tip is on the topic of guard clauses and exceptions, specifically whether and when it's appropriate to throw an exception in response to certain kinds of inputs, which is how guard clauses work. Our sponsor this week is DevBetter, group career coaching for developers. If you're not advancing as quickly in your career as you'd like, you may find value in joining a semi-formal career and technical coaching program like DevBetter.com. I launched DevBetter a few months ago, and so far we have a small group of motivated developers meeting every week or two. I answer questions, review code, suggest areas in which to improve, and occasionally assign homework. Interested? You can learn more at DevBetter.com. Now on to the topic at hand. As a bit of background, I described guard clauses in episode 4. If you're listening to these shows in most recent first order, I suggest you configure your podcast app to let you listen in order from the beginning, and then start back with episode 1. You'll thank me later. In any case, to review, a guard clause is a check you make at the start of a function or method that then throws an exception if some input is not valid. For instance, you could have a function that is supposed to send an email to an email address that is provided as a string argument. If the string is null, or perhaps even if it's empty, it might throw an argument null exception or something similar before attempting to create and send the email. If you like the guard clause pattern, I have a NuGet package that you can use to easily add and extend them in a consistent fashion in your applications. Look for the link in the show notes. So recently, listener Jeremy C. writes, I discovered your podcast recently and am going through it. I love the guard class shortcut for the happy path. What I noticed is that this behavior relies exclusively on throwing exceptions rather than what I learned 20 years ago in school, that exceptions are for the unexpected, and if you can reliably prevent throwing an exception, like checking for a null and handling it, you should in order to avoid the execution cost of exception handling. Is my information just outdated? Perhaps I'm too old of a coder and too many old habits are stuck and too many old habits are stuck. It's true that exceptions should not be used for control flow in your applications. That means if it's a normal condition for a function to get a null as an argument, perhaps because that situation means create a new thing instead of do something with this existing thing, then you wouldn't want to write code that depended on the exception being thrown for its behavior. For example, you wouldn't want to have a try block that tried to work with some object, and then a catch block that caught the null reference exception when that object was null, and created a new instance inside of that check block. There's already plenty of reference material you can find about why this is considered a bad practice. In my opinion, there are two main reasons. The first one is performance. Exceptions are far more expensive than if statements, so you shouldn't use them where an if statement is more appropriate. This is the main one, and because of it, writing code that leverages try-catch statements for something more than error handling is unusual, it's unexpected. Developers will be surprised to see this approach, which violates the principle of least astonishment. You want readers of your code to be able to immediately understand what your code is doing, and surprising them by doing things in odd ways is contrary to that goal. Coming back to guard clauses, the idea is that you're setting up an expectation that under all normal conditions in your application, you expect that these arguments will follow certain constraints. If they don't, the program is simply not going to work the way it should. In this case, an exception is the appropriate response and is more elegant than any other solution like returning a Boolean value or a magic number or null and then having the caller have to know to check for those results. Thanks, Jeremy, for the great question. After I answered, he summed it up like this. So the guard clause is for the situation of, I told you the expected inputs, and while I'll protect myself from bad data, I'm not going to make a huge mess of if statements to protect myself. I'll just pass the mess back to you since you're the one that was giving me crap. That's pretty much it. That's it for this week. Thank you for subscribing to Weekly Dev Tips. This will be the last episode of 2018, so Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year with another great developer tip. All right, so that's the initial recording. Come back to our checklist. Add the intro MP3. I don't need to do that anymore. I used to do that. Mix and render into one track, same thing. Find 3 seconds of dead air. Jump over here. Grab the start. Call an effect. Noise reduction. Get noise profile. It pulls that off that 3 seconds. Now Control A. Grab everything. Effect. Noise reduction. OK. Takes out all the noise. Now go through and remove gaps. I don't need that first 3 seconds anymore. I don't know if you can hear this, but I'm listening to the audio here. Yeah, it doesn't look like you're hearing this. Not sure why. Well, trust me, I'm hearing this. You can see the audio jumping around here. Theoretically, your desktop audio should be showing up right here, but it's not. Got some extra dead air there. I can use shift mouse wheel to move around because I got a little flub here I want to fix. So I want to say from and too many old habits. Let's see. That sounds better. Alright, so done editing. Let's see, save the project. Let's go up 036. It's going to be 036, exceptions and guard clauses. Exceptions and Santa clauses. 036, exceptions and guard clauses. Done. Alright, save it there. Use options, export to MP3 in the new folder we just made. Medium, fast, force mono, save. Update this. Alright, seriously, what did I call this thing? Exceptions and guard clauses. Alright, cool. 36. 36. How many different places do I have to say 36? Go. Alright, so now we're exporting it to MP3. And we can go find that folder. Alright, there it is. Go to its properties, details. We can set a few things here like publisher. Stuff like that. I think that's good enough. Right, then I'm going to copy that to my episodes folder. Make sure this looks pretty much like everything else it does. Alright, so now I'm ready to publish this on Simplecast. Let's pull that over here. Simplecast looks like this. We want 036, so we're going to say add a new episode. 036 colon exceptions and guard clauses. 036 is my URL. We're going to go live on December 31st at 2 a.m. in the morning. And dev better and summary is here. And then all this goes here. Don't really need that bit. I did want to add the principal least astonishment, on Wikipedia, so add that both to my transcript so I don't forget about it. Right there. And also on the link, of course. And we may as well add it down here as well. Alright, now all that's left to do is look at this, verify it looks good. Okay, and we're going to add our audio file, and it's going to be in the episodes list. There, open, boom, save the episode. It's being processed. They'll send me an email when it's done. Usually takes about 5 seconds. Let's go back to my checklist. Right there. Do all these things. Copy that to there. Update there. Set publish date there. Update spreadsheet. I haven't done that in a while. I need to do that. But at this point, I think I'm pretty much good to go. If I check my email, it says, hey look, Team Simplecast, 0 minutes ago, your podcast is ready. So we're good. So you got a sneak peek and saw how that was recorded. Here's how I go through my checklist. If and when I find some other thing I would use, I just update this checklist. So this is something I use for myself, but it's something you can use yourself as well if you want to get into podcasting and see how easy it is. Obviously, this is a little easier if you're only doing a recording on your own and you don't have someone that you're Skyping in or something like that. But the main thing is that Audacity is a free open source tool that will just record whatever you say into your mic. And if you want it to also mix someone else's conversation, all you have to do is have them use Audacity on their end as well and record. And then it helps if you do something like, have a clap, and then you can look for that marker inside the audio of both files and then line them up here and then mix and render them into one track, which you can do under tracks here. So it's pretty easy to do even if you have an interview going, if you can get both raw files. There's other tools you can use for podcasting. I've used some that when I've been a guest on other people's podcasts that use like an online thing that records and does all that for you. But I haven't used them myself, so I can't really tell you more than that. I just know that they exist and they work. Another option you could consider is I do use a tool called Zoom to do online meetings with clients. And you can record with Zoom as well. And then edit the result when you're finished. So if you wanted to, you could use Zoom or something similar for an interview style podcast, especially if you wanted to have a whole bunch of people on it. Zoom supports many different many individual people connecting into the call, and so I know I've used Zoom as well for recorded podcast style conversations that you could use. All right, so that's it. I think a total of 0 people actually watched this live, so hooray for streaming. But I will get this up on YouTube and we'll see how it goes. Bye.